All right, we are recording. And first things first, Cygnus Loop. Using this image again, not just because it's a cool image and not just because in fact, the video has no relation to the others that I've used this in, but because it kind of looks like a signal, and I want to talk about communication. I mean, seriously, I could almost see that on an oscilloscope. Anyhow, this video is about communication because, while it's great to be able, to have spaceships potentially going hundreds of light years, if they can't really talk to each other or talk back to Earth, they kind of lose their purpose in some ways. I mean, it's, you'd have to, it'd be such a burden to do various things doing that. And I know historically we do have examples of that. It's Columbus finding the New World. It wasn't easy to communicate back, but it still is. We'd want that. And certainly I want that in my fiction. So in the Catherine verse, I do have what's called DeepCom. I know, I'm so good at names. Yeah, DeepCom for this, yes, deep space communication as opposed to dark space, but dark-com didn't sound so good. But yeah, initially it was just some way to, communicate faster than the speed of light. And I did start thinking out, some advantages and disadvantages to it, even before I had really anything more than just how do we communicate this quickly? DeepCom. Even when it was just at that level, I still had certain things there. But while I was writing a letter from Catherine, which is actually in a way a little ironic, I saw a piece of science research that was actually really neat and relevant in a way. So I want to talk about that. So yeah, this research came from, and I am not sure how to pronounce it correctly because I don't know how to read certain accents. University of Göttingen? Not sure. I'll try to put a link in the description so you can read the press release, and I'll even include the link to the IOP science site that's for the actual paper, where you can at least see the abstract for free. Yeah, I just want to go back to that tab. So what was this research? Well, what they found was it should be possible to create a hyperfast soliton using conventional energy sources. I shall translate. So, solitons are this kind of neat type of wave where I did see one place describing them as nonlinear. But basically, it's a wave that can travel alone. It's a solitary wave, hence the name, but it maintains its shape over long distances and its speed. So in theory, if you had a soliton traveling faster than the speed of light, and you put something in it, that thing in it will also travel faster than the speed of light because it's carrying it. And it is also going to be very efficient. It maintains its shape and such. And shape and speed. Okay? So that's neat. But why don't we have these then? If this is something that was already thought of. And indeed, it was for a while. But apparently, every single time that somebody had thought about, based on, Einstein's formulas, and there was somebody else's name. I don't remember what that was. Einstein was definitely one of the two. Every time that work had been done before, basically people figured that, oh yeah, it can't be done because we need an exotic form of energy. What is an exotic form of energy? Well, in this case, that's something with a negative energy density. I'm not sure I want to even touch that one in science fiction. But that's what they were stuck with. But what the researchers at this university, I'm not going to try to get the name right again, as I said, link in the description. What they found when reviewing this older research was that actually there's spots in the math that people hadn't explored yet. So they worked on that and found that, hey, it can be done with conventional energy. So, in theory, we do have a path to some means of creating actually warp fields, not just, sorry, I got an itch on the back of my head, not just a means of carrying communication like I'm using it for. Technically, this would be for warp fields, but I already had warp fields figured out, so I didn't want to try to take the research. Hang on, there we go. Take the research and take my warp fields and merge them together. But DeepCom was still very nebulous. It was, as I said, how do we travel? How do we get communication going faster than the speed of light? DeepCom. How does it work? But now I had an idea. Well, more formal idea. So, and I just want to check on this. Okay, yeah, want to mention that before for getting in, because this was, as I was just saying, this what would actually allow warp fields. This would actually allow a ship potentially to travel faster than the speed of light. And one thing that was also neat is they figured out a configuration for the soliton such that there would be minimal tidal forces within it. So the idea there being you'd have minimal to no like time dilation. So it would actually not produce the twin paradox, which is if you have somebody on a ship traveling faster, well, near the speed of light, and in this case technically also faster, you could have, and it's like they're on the ship and you have a twin on Earth. There's technically the problem that the twin traveling at relativistic speeds will age more slowly. So if they then come back to Earth, they would maybe have aged a year while their twin is decades older. Kind of a problem. But yeah, they found that you could have a configuration for the soliton that would avoid that. So yes, they were basically talking about warp fields. Now maybe in the actual paper, which I don't have the ability to see, beyond just the abstract, maybe this would actually, what I described for warp fields in my book, be a lot closer. I don't know. And as I already said, I had that figured out in my own way. I already had my solution. I didn't need this. But DeepCom, maybe. Yeah, okay. So I am at the point in my notes where I can just explain what my idea is for DeepCom, which is basically take the soliton, put a photon in it, and move. No, I mean, like, legitimately, that's the idea. Take modern wireless communication, but put the photons carrying the information within these solitons so they can travel faster than the speed of light. It's really, really that simple. I'm just trying to make sure I'm following the notes, because at this point I do actually have like things I want to make sure I do say and not just go by memory and flow. So yeah, you would put the photons in there and it'd travel faster than the speed of light, which is great. That's a great advantage because it's something that we are already familiar with, but also has certain disadvantages because you're talking about a huge distance that these things have to go over, and communications can interfere with each other. It's like there's a whole thing, like how do you cell phones keep from interfering with each other? It's actually a very interesting thing. And one thing that, it's a wild story. It was Hedy Lamarr that actually helped come up with this. Yes, the actress. She came up with this, presented to the Navy during World War II, and the Navy was like, no, because we don't want player piano. We are working with torpedoes here, not player pianos. And it's a weird thing that ended up happening because it's like legitimately. Apparently, in World War II, you could actually aim torpedoes. Like, you could actually fire them and then broadcast signals to them to turn. And they came, and Hedy Lamarr and I don't remember the friend she was working with, came up with a solution that, yes, was kind of derived from player pianos to prevent jamming. Okay, I mean, it's like, it's really neat, but the Navy, the admiral that got this was like, we're not working with player pianos, and dismissed it. But the Navy kept the record. Years later, they ended up going, finding it in there and then doing wireless communication research based on that and never credited Hedy Lamarr. It took years later, like decades later, before finally it was revealed that her original research, which was also classified, was revealed, and then there was a concerted effort led in part by her son to get her the credit for it. I think she had already died, and it wasn't about money or anything like that. It was just yes, she did make this contribution to, well, she tried to make this contribution to the war effort and has made this contribution to modern wireless communications. I mean, it is like one of the cornerstones there. Anyway, getting back to this, you do still have those concerns. And it's like you have that concern with a cell tower that I'm not sure where the nearest one for me is, but it might only be a few miles away. But we still need to be concerned with making sure that the cell phones don't crosstalk, don't talk over each other. So you need this very intelligent, but it does get kind of convoluted how it all works, especially when it's likely thousands of things trying to communicate in a relatively narrow bandwidth. So when you are now trying to span light years, kind of a problem. So just getting back to my notes, because I definitely went off for a bit there, but I'm dead serious. Look up Hedy Lamarr and wireless communication. In fact, just to make certain. Yeah, I mean, it's like in DuckDuckGo, Hedy Lamarr, why, and it was already like filling out to wireless communication. So yeah, if you just look that up, you will be able to find information on it. It really is really neat. And also the actual solution is so clever. It's very clever, very elegant, and very accessible. I mean, it's like it's not. There was some weird stuff in wireless communication that a lot of people would not understand, including me. This is one. No, you could probably teach this in middle school. Even. I mean, it really is very accessible. I'm just trying to make sure. But yeah, so had the issue of the. Okay, yeah. So it is now. I just get to talking about priorities. And also, by the way, why did I say it's a little ironic I saw this with concerns to a letter from Catherine, part of the premise that I had. And this was before I saw this research. I started writing before this research, started writing that book before the research came out. But I didn't finish until after, so it did mesh up very nicely. But I already had that idea with DeepCom that it would be somewhat bandwidth limited, or at least expensive. So if it is, you just needed to send a letter or something else. There's plenty of communication that can be asynchronous. Just, you send a letter, you wait for it to get there, you wait for a reply. The letter from Catherine is the whole, yeah, we can do that. So you have ships that, yes, they do deliver mail back and forth. Instead of using, like in Star Trek, subspace. Which, I mean, if you look at my, what is that, Wormholes in Hyperspace? I think that's the name of the video. It's like, I don't like that whole idea, so I want something else. But yeah, so it like works out perfectly with a letter from Catherine that you would have that. And so there are priorities. The top two priorities that I thought of, and there might be more as I do additional thinking, are the military, and also a group of explorers, a class of explorers I call Peters, which that can be a completely different video. But both, I mean, the military you would obviously expect may need synchronous communication at some point. So that would basically be you have these solitons going at such a high speed that you despite being light years apart, you can talk to each other, you can hold a conversation. Whereas the Peters, you wouldn't have that. It's more that they're just collecting so much data. Because the way these ships, and there's more to it than this, including why they're called Peters, but basically the ships would have a whole bunch of telescopes on there that are constantly recording information and beaming it back. Well, that's a lot of information, so they need a high priority in DeepCom to make sure that information is coming back. So, yeah, you just have those priorities, and then, things have lower priority going down. So you have to get creative with things such as, okay, does this need to be synchronous communication or not? Probably not in many cases, because you want to use as little bandwidth as possible, and also as little energy, and because it would take a lot of energy to go a lot faster. It's just finding the spots in that. Spots my notes. I'm actually kind of at the end of it, which is now my brain is starting to trip over itself trying to figure out more. But yeah, so it would just be you have the lower priority bandwidth that's available to more people, but it can be expensive. You also would have certain reserved areas there for emergencies. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of done there. I mean, it is just, I had already figured out the disadvantages with DeepCom of there's limited bandwidth. You do want to avoid things talking over each other, even though there's some wild stuff you can do. So, for example, you can use different phases. So that's, it isn't quite, well, here, this one works. So you could have like a phase up communication, so it's going like this. So if you have an antenna aligned in that way, that means you'll get the signal. We can have another phase that's like this. So it's going like that. These two won't actually interfere with each other. So if you have another antenna this way, you're solved. Not necessarily the easiest solution when you have space that things turn a lot. But there's also one thing that I know I've seen I think it was actually for use in optical fibers, but a chiral phase, where instead of it going like this or like this, it actually spins. So it makes like a helix. And you could then have those layered inside of each other. It's really, really neat. But potentially you could have that solution there, but it still is. You're trying to span hundreds of thousands, potentially, cubic light years. with some of these. I was like, you can focus to be like, hey, I want to go in that direction, but it still is. If you don't want to be off by a few degrees and then miss a message, so you have to make it wide. But yeah. So I guess the last note I have here is something that is in the press release from the university. That's kind of nuts and also kind of important for the whole. Hey, if we found this, why aren't we traveling faster than speed of light now? Why aren't we using this? Well, because their original calculations were that, yes, we can use conventional energy for this. Great. How much energy? Well, to make one that would be 100 meters in radius, so it could encompass a ship, is on the order of hundreds of times the mass of the planet Jupiter. Yeah. Fortunately, it does point out you need to get it about 30 orders of magnitude lower to the range of modern nuclear fission reactors. But because even though I think this is why science fiction is so cool, even though it's like, yeah, we could never actually make these negative energy densities that I mentioned earlier for solitons that were previously mathematically figured out, researchers still worked on it. And apparently there were some that would potentially lower the energy required by nearly 60 orders of magnitude, it comments here. So it's like, yeah, we may actually be able to... this is a feasible pathway to explore, even though it sure as hell sounds a lot like science fiction. But it's like, no, this is actually real, and it's, yeah. And one last thing I will add concerning this, and then I'll try to stop rambling. This research was actually from just a few years ago. March 9th, 2021 is when it came out. So just to help put that in context for still how recent this is. And it would not surprise me if it also has not been disseminated too widely. It's just one of those weird things with science. You don't necessarily see stuff like this get out to a lot of people. Just how it is. All right. See ya.